Hello and welcome to this special discussion on the budget, on Modi government's first budget after coming to power the third time. Uh, Now we have with us Praveen Chakravarty, who is a Congress leader. He's a chairman of All India Professional Congress, an organization which is very active, and he is also an important member of the Congress economic think tank, and he played an important role in the formulation of the some of the economic aspects of the Congress manifesto, along with former Finance Minister Mr. P. Chidambaram. Why I'm saying all this is there's a context to it. The Congress had come up with some big ideas on providing employment to the vast jobless youth in our country, which has been a problem which has plagued the Modi government for 10 years. We've seen an unprecedented job stagnation, employment stagnation seen any time in the past. We've not seen such stagnation in the last 40, 50 years since Manmohan Singh presented his first budget, the new economic reforms he introduced. So Praveen, welcome to our show, and uh, uh, I want to just kick off straight away by saying that for the first time, the word employment has figured a, a number of times in the budget. It didn't figure in the interim budget, and uh, there is a scheme which the government has introduced, which is now being projected by the BJP. The government has a very centerpiece of their employment revival program, and we got you on the show because it looks quite similar to something that you had proposed in the Congress manifesto, but it is not exactly the same. So, could you just tell us what you think of whatever has been proposed in the budget on the employment front? Uh, Ravi.
Um, yeah, good afternoon, Venu. You're right. I think employment figures prominently for the first time. I think my count was something around 23 times the word employment was mentioned in the budget today, which was not the case at all earlier. And this is reflective of, I think, the lessons that the elections, recent elections, threw up. you know, in fact, soon after the elections, when I did an interview for Bloomberg, they asked me how would I characterize it, and I said the election message was very clear for the ruling party, which is voters was youth, especially, was saying, "Thank you for the temple, but where is my job?" That
Yeah,
was the message,
yeah,
and I think that message is clearly resonated, and I appreciate that, and I think I'm glad that this is how democracies work. This is the power of democracy. Voters send a message, and governments, however mighty they may they may portray themselves, however big chest size they have, they have to ultimately listen to voters. And that is what has happened in this budget. It's very clearly reflected. Now, if you recall, when we did the manifesto, and I was part of the manifesto committee, I drafted the manifesto along with Mr. P. Chidambaram. Um, the first reaction, the first reaction that Mr. Modi had soon after, the day after we announced the manifesto, was he called it a Muslim League document.
yeah,
Now, let me tell you, from that document, we had proposed employment-linked incentives for jobs, for to resolve the jobs situation. We said we have production-linked incentives, which
yeah,
is for production and output that is not necessarily yielding jobs. We need an employment-linked incentive. It is a radically new idea. We had proposed that. We had proposed a right to apprenticeship program. We had proposed a strategic mining program. We had proposed the removal of the angel tax to spur investment, which will create jobs.
yeah,
Guess what? All these four were in the budget that was announced today. For the first time, the word employment linked incentive scheme has been used in this country in any budget. So, for all the castigation of this being a Muslim League document, I am glad that today's budget has actually been inspired by that Muslim League document. Now, Now, what I want to point out, and I want to first, so I must appreciate. They say imitation is the best form of flattery, and so I must appreciate that the finance minister set aside petty politics and adopted some of these specific ideas.
Especially the employment linked program, employment linked incentive for manufacturing. Yeah.
Yeah, for industry, not just manufacturing, for industry. ELI, as we have PLI, right? The government announced set aside 2 lakh crores for PLI 3 years ago, and then they were giving incentives to corporates to produce goods. The
Yeah, but
assumption was
that added to the corporate bottom line, but it didn't produce the requisite employment.
exactly. It did not produce any employment. So our proposal was do an employment ELI, not a PLI, but an ELI, right? And that's what the finance minister has announced in the budget today.
But
But the big,
have you studied the details? Are you convinced about the details? Are there any devils in the details?
well, there are no details, and that's the problem.
Okay.
So that is the problem. So in fact, I wrote a detailed piece in Deccan Herald on June 29th, PLI to ELI, and I called it, headline was PLI to ELI, an idea for Nirmala Sitharaman.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
today morning in the Indian Express, there was a piece again where I talked about ELI, and where I had very clearly given details of the design of the scheme.
Yeah.
I didn't find that in the budget. I didn't find that in the budget announcement. So I don't know how this is going to work. There are some
But
details
they've
about.
given just 1 second. I just going to interrupt here. They've given a big number. 1 crore youth will be. The government will pay for their entry into the industry. Now, I don't know how the government will pay. What are the basis for those payments? And they've also linked the whole thing to EPF, Employee Provident Fund, etc. Anyway, you carry on. Sorry.
No, that's what I was coming to. That's the second idea that they've borrowed, which is we called it apprenticeship. They're calling it internship. That's fine. That's okay. Okay. There, they've given some details. As far as our apprenticeship idea is concerned, I think, in my view, they have copied the idea but not understood our idea.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is our proposal was apprenticeship would be very broad based. We had said that it would involve nearly 1 lakh companies that are GST registered with annual turnover of more than 10 crores that would be eligible to take on apprentices.
Okay.
What have they said? It is limited to the top 500 companies. Why? Why is it limited to top 500 companies? Second, they give out some fancy number of 1 crore youth getting internships.
Isn't
Okay,
it limiting it to 500 companies? Aren't you narrowing down the scope of the program?
absolutely. I mean, and here's this is why it's illogical. I'm coming to that. They've said 1 crore youth in top 500 companies. Okay, 1 crore youth over 5 years. They've said fine. So 20,000 per year. That means each company has to take 4,000 interns every year.
But that's
What?
impossible.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so clearly that's why they've not understood the idea. Our
Also, Praveen,
proposal,
one more point, just to supplement what you're saying. The top 500 companies are mostly capital intensive companies. You have to go down to these smaller, medium size, labor intensive MSMEs, as you said, about 10 crore turnover. You can have 10, 20, whatever. They are the ones who will need in the service sector. Mid-sized companies in the service sector are the ones who would be able to absorb. Not a capital intensive, like typically an automated textile mill does not really hire labor these days. Yeah.
precisely. Because I will tell you, when I was writing the manifesto, I had consultations with industry. It was the
Yeah.
MSME sector that came to me and said, we need this. Why is it only restricted to the big companies? If
Exactly.
anything, the leather manufacturer with revenues of 10 crores, the textile manufacturer, these are companies that actually need interns, need people, need apprentices, which the government will help fund.
Yeah.
So it should be for them. I mean, so this government, true to their style, have stuck to the big corporates. And that is deeply problematic. But having said that, yes, they did borrow the idea, but I'm not sure they've understood it.
Okay. So, so you're saying that the proof of the pudding, we'll have to see how it is executed. So that's precisely what I have also tweeted, saying that there are big ideas, but this government's past record in execution has left a lot to be desired. So the really the execution is what we'll have to wait and see on how they do these jobs, create the new jobs, and what do you make of the salary, the first salary that they're trying to? The government said it'll pay. What is that? I mean,
It's really very complicated. I mean, that's why I said I think our proposal is very simple. Nearly all companies that are GST registered with more than 10 crores will take internships. The internships will be for people that either have a diploma or a graduate, and this is a right-based program. So people will come and ask for it, and when they ask for it, we said they will be provided a stipend of 1 lakh a year, which is 8,500 a month, which will be split equally between the government and the employer. So it's very simple, and this we believe would have spurred acted as a proper incentive, especially for the MSME sector. You're absolutely right, because the government's past track record in announcements versus execution has been fairly shoddy. Remember, let's not forget, exactly around ELI, employment, production, the government very fancifully launched. Prime Minister Modi launched Make in India in 2015. Guess what? And this is for to improve manufacturing, right? Manufacturing actually went from 17% of GDP to 15%. It actually fell
I
after
think it's going down to 13% of GDP.
Correct.
The latest
So
figures.
latest figures, yeah. So it didn't really quite. So I think.
So this employment aside, of course, yeah, you have a special interest in this because you designed this whole scheme for the Congress. Tell me, what's your broad sense of the budget? Does the budget reverse some of the structural weaknesses that we have seen persist over the last 7-8 years, in fact 10 years? So we have unprecedentedly, we've seen 10 years of stagnation in private investment growth, employment growth, savings growth, income growth. Now, I have not seen, I've been covering the Indian economy for now 40 years, not seen stagnation in all these parameters for a decade plus. Now, there is obviously something wrong. Do you think that aspect is addressed in this budget? Is there a structural reversal in terms of all these problems are concerned?
I think so. If I now kind of put on the macroeconomist hat, I think you're right. What is the problem? See, all these problems that you've outlined, which is unemployment, rise of stagnant incomes, all of that, they are coming at exactly the same time when we are also apparently the fastest growing economy in the world, right?
Yeah.
The GDP growth and all of that, right? So clearly, and in fact, I had written a piece more than a year ago saying, whose GDP is this? I think that is where the fundamental problem was, and this government, I think for 10 years believed or it was just lazy thinking that you grow GDP, everybody, will benefit. And finally, they have realized that is not the case. So we're actually seeing the way I read this budget is it's a structural shift from trickle down capitalism, trickle down economic growth, which has not worked for the last 10 years, to direct interventions in the labor market and to boost incomes and consumption for people, which I would actually laud and appreciate. Now, the real question is, how do they get it done? I think that's where the real issue is.
Okay, so you agree with the broad idea, but again, you said execution, it'll depend on how they execute it. But Praveen, even GDP that you're talking about, the GDP growth numbers have been questioned by many people, including somebody like Arvind Subramaniam, who's been advisor to this government itself, NDA-1. He has been saying that the GDP numbers are not commensurate with some of the other variables. Like, for instance, many economists have said that the even government data, this government's own data shows that over 10 years, consumption growth, private consumption growth has been barely like 3% a year over 10 years. So there can't be such a huge gap between consumption growth and GDP growth. So therefore, many people have wondered whether is GDP growth real. If GDP growth, typically consumption growth, economists say should be closer to the GDP growth, maybe a percentage point closer to GDP growth. But here, consumption growth has been half of GDP growth. So do you believe the GDP growth numbers? Are you in a camp which casts doubt on the GDP growth?
I mean, my it's kind of like EVMs, right? I mean, we have doubts about it, but
Yeah.
unless we're able to prove that it's not correct, and I mean, I've spoken with Arvind, I've read Arvind's pieces. He's right. He's quoting a bunch of other indicators to
Yeah.
ask the question: how can an economy grow when all these other indicators are lagging, right? Remember, I think what is happening really as far as GDP growth is concerned, how are we getting this GDP growth? It's the government spending money.
Yeah.
That's basically how we've been getting GDP growth,
Yeah.
right? So now, is that for real? No, I don't know. It definitely boggles the mind. It definitely raises questions.
And Praveen, now it's good that the government is intervening directly in the labor market, as you said. It's a good initiative, provided they execute it well. I mean, you put that caveat. Now, for the corporates to absorb apprentices on such a large scale, or interns on such a large scale, as they call it, should there also be a growth in consumption demand? The corporates need to invest more. At the present level of production, how can they hire more people? They need to see more consumption demand in the economy, more, therefore more investments. So do you see that happening? Do you see some green shoots in say rural consumption, because rural consumption has been down uh, uh, for a decade, been stagnant, and uh, even corporate heads like consumer company heads, HUL CEOs and Rajiv Bajaj, they have been saying that they have not seen volume growth for years now. Volume growth in their product, mostly uh, they sell in rural sector. So how do you see this conundrum playing out?
See, I mean, how does one boost consumption? I mean, I think it is a fact that consumption demand is very, very tepid, very low, right? But how does one boost consumption? One is, the putting more money in the hands of people who will then
Yeah,
go out and spend, right?
one you give directly to the people. Yeah, yeah,
So directly give it, which was our Nyai proposal in 2019. Okay.
90. Yeah,
Okay, so now, one could do that, or the other way to do it is to intervene in labor markets,
yeah,
okay, and say, like for example, let's say all these apprentices and interns get hired, okay, now which means they're getting salary, they're getting some income, which they will use to go out and spend. And
yeah.
so you start to boost consumption that way. So this way, you're also saying, okay, you were giving them money, but they're also kind of there's this additional thing of, okay, dignity of work. They're going into a workplace. They'll get some skills and some training. They make themselves more employable. When they come out after the year internship, then they just become much more employable. Maybe they'll go start their own business. There could be many things, right?
Yeah.
So, and hence we had proposed this in our manifesto. And I think it could be, so we're right. Consumption is a problem, but how does one come out of this cycle? How does one boost consumption?
The point I'm making, Praveen, is that it's good to intervene in the labor market and bring a lot of large number of youths with some skills into this internship program, as Congress's apprenticeship, but BJP's internship. But to sustain such employment, you will definitely need more investment by companies. The typical virtuous cycle: more investment, more jobs, more spending, more money in the hands of people. So India, one point that Rathin Roy makes, who was part of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, economist, he says that India's consuming middle class
Yeah.
has been stagnant. Unlike in China, where the consuming middle class grew like multifold from 200 million to now 800 million, earning a reasonably good salary every month. India, according to Rathin Roy, has been stagnant over several years. It has really not grown. So therefore, we end up with a PLFSF. We end up with various surveys showing the bottom 70-80% of the incomes, people, incomes are stagnant or even going down in real terms. So low quality employment, low quality product, so we are caught in that circuit. So I was wondering whether mere labor market intervention will do. It will definitely help, but is it a substitute for private sector to come forward and really invest more? For that, you need demand to go up. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't have answers for this. Will aggregate demand, consumer demand in the economy, how will it go up? Um,
See, you're right. I mean, private investment has to go up. Okay.
yeah,
How can private investment go up? Either they see demand
yeah,
and hence they start to invest, which then creates jobs, and or you do what the economic survey seems to be doing, or which is go and plead, saying
yeah.
private sector, please go and invest, please go and invest,
Which,
or
which,
you do right,
yeah,
or you do what Nirmala Sitaraman used to do earlier, which is I have given you. She used to literally like castigate them and scold them like a school teacher, saying I've given you a corporate tax cut, go and invest. Now
in
they've
fact,
understood that
yeah,
doesn't work.
even economic survey says the corporates have not uh, put their share of investment, while the government
Yeah, yeah.
has
I mean,
done the heavy lifting. Yeah.
the economic survey, I mean, actually says it is their national duty to invest. It's
So
so,
to this, Ratin Roy's response was, I saw him on some TV channel. He's saying that private sector doesn't have any national duty. They will
ex-
only invest if they see there is some demand. There is no national
uh,
duty as such.
yeah, so it's like you can't just scold and obey everyone. I mean, they're not some BJP karyakarta where you just scold them and obey them and they'll fall in line. That's not doesn't
Yeah,
work. So we have to boost demand. The boosting demand is you get the government to spend money, and that
yeah,
will hopefully boost demand, which I think, to be fair to the government, they've been doing, which is capital expenditure has gone up, right? I know Ratin has some points about that also, but regardless. Second, like I said, programs like getting more people into the labor force, getting them incomes, which then starts to give demand. So these are the only two
yeah.
options to stimulate demand,
True,
and hence we have to try these.
true. And finally, Praveen, the the GDP projection, the economic survey, I thought was very low on ambition. They were projecting GDP growth medium to long at 6.5 to 7%, and there was a Citibank survey recently which said that at 6.5 to 7%, we cannot absorb the number of people who enter the job market every year. Citibank's projection was about 12 million come in, and this 6.5 7% growth will not absorb that kind of entry every year into the labor market. So what do you say to that? Is it are they low on ambition? I mean, the budget also projects 10% as a nominal GDP growth. If you take inflation at about say 4%, it's barely 6% GDP growth they are projecting. So
I
what
think
are your sense on this?
See, I think they're worried about the external factor, the external situation, which
Okay, the
is
political situation, etc.
yeah, the trade. I mean, listen, we cannot grow. The only time India has grown nominal GDP at about 15-16% is when trade grows and exports grow. And
Exports, right? Exports were like clocking 20% plus
exactly.
throughout throughout UPA 1 and 2 actually. Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. We peaked. Exports was at a clip.
yeah,
I think that their concern, and knowing the chief economic advisor a bit, because we've had many co-authored articles many years ago. So I think he's probably worried about the external situation. So if you can't
yeah.
export, if export growth is tepid, I don't think we can have very high GDP growth. I think even the growth that we're seeing right now is all because of low base, COVID lockdown, where we had negative nominal GDP growth for the first time in India's history. Negative nominal, not even real. So during that COVID year, so from there we're coming back, we're bouncing back slowly. So that's why the growth looks very high, but I think there's a natural ceiling we will hit. And from there to grow, we have to have the exports. We have to have exports going up.
True, true. Even Anand Nageswaran, the CEA, he said on a TV channel that the GDP stock has grown 20% over 4 years since 2019-20. So that works out to an average growth of 4%. Compounded,
Exactly.
it'll be about 20%. So that's a it's not such a huge growth, 4%.
Exactly. So we're
But
actually we're
that's why,
actually
Praveen, that's why it's surprising that at 4% growth, as per CEA's own assessment, this government claimed that massive jobs were created in the last 4 years. To
see
2
that. I
crore
mean,
every year during
I,
COVID, which of course nobody believes. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's a
that is absolutely rubbish. In fact, I joked in my article in the Indian Express today that if that was true, if the whatever that RBI data is true, Modi can actually stake a claim for a Nobel in economics. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
where
yeah. I saw the tweet. Yeah, yeah, it could. Yeah,
yeah, where GDP can halve and jobs can triple.
Nobel in economics for reduced GDP and doubling of employment. Yeah,
tripling
yeah.
tripling employment and halving GDP growth. I mean, that's
And you
unheard
said
of.
3x employment growth in services and manufacturing.
Yeah,
While GDP is going down. Yeah, you're right.
correct. So I think
One last question, Praveen.
yeah.
It's very curious observation in the economic survey, uh, which seems to suggest that the government has suggests that government is admitting a big mistake they made in the last, say, 5 6 years. It says that it's time to open up FDI in emerging tech areas to China in order to spur uh, you know uh, growth in several sectors where China has a huge advantage. It says China is embedded in the global supply chain in very many key emerging technology products. What do you make of this? And this is a government which has been rejecting, publicly been shunning China, saying that we don't need China for anything. They banned many of the Chinese apps. They rejected many Chinese investments. Now they are saying that we need Chinese FDI. What's your sense? What do you gather from this?
See, it's to put it kind of politically, this is finally a realization that the economy, India's economy, is not like your BJP karyakarta, where you can just ask them to do something and it will obey. You cannot
Yeah,
just tap the economy on its head and
yeah,
say, "Don't depend on China. We will do
mm,
our own thing."
yeah.
Doesn't work.
And the
So
dependence on China increased actually last 3 4 years.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So, the economy has a mind of its own. We are ever since 1991, we are now India's economy is too large to be dictated to. And this is where I think Prime Minister Modi has a very fundamental discomfort. He does not know how to work with anything that has a mind of its own. He's
true.
only used to ordering and getting the behavior that he wants. So I think the economic survey acknowledges that economic nationalism and all these other political stuff that Modi wants to do does not work in India's economy. Clearly, data shows that our reliance on China has only increased after all the bravado against China.
And
So we
they are our second largest trade partner, right?
exactly, and they'll soon become our largest. And
Yeah,
especially because as the world is going through a transition to electric, from fossil to electric, China
yeah,
just dominates that entire supply chain.
yeah.
How, so how can he not trade with China? How can he not do business with China? So I
True.
think the economic survey acknowledges and says, let's be practical and pragmatic about this.
Okay. And finally, about the comment that there is too much speculative trading going on in the Indian stock markets, and I'm asking you this for a reason, and that this does not lead to productive capital. The economic survey says, and I remember you had raised a big issue about how the two leaders, the top two leaders of BJP, Prime Minister Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah, had publicly talked about, had urged people to buy shares during the election campaign, and you had asked for an investigation on that, and you had said that there was a scam in that. So, and now the economic survey seems to sort of implicitly sort of seems to concede that that we are going down a completely disastrous path in letting speculation at such a high level. The futures market, I'm told, is now nearly 95% of all volumes, isn't
Yeah,
it? Futures.
yeah, yeah,
It's like a
yeah.
casino. It's like a casino play. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, see, absolutely. It is correct that the stock markets is it's just a casino gambling den, and I think the home minister and the prime minister have no idea about some of these things. They just think, oh, people make money, and I think there's a larger. I still believe that there was a scam behind the exit polls. I have data to prove that, to show that, and I've explained it. So we still need an investigation, and that they are afraid, they're scared, and that is why they're not accepting an investigation into it. So I think the economic survey on this is absolutely right. The stock market is just entirely speculative. I'm going one step ahead and saying the speculation is actually being done at the behest of people in power.
Yeah. So thank you, Praveen, for talking
Thank you.
to us. We've covered a whole range of subjects: budget, economic survey, and the economy. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Will. Thanks.